We call the meeting to order. All right, welcome to the fifth board meeting of the fiscal year 2023. It's February 8th. Thank you all for coming. We have a roll call, please.
Sure. Lemons?
Here.
Magnuson?
Here.
Pantera? Here. Rush? Here. Plenty?
Here.
All board members present, none absent.
Okay. And I'm not aware we have any communications today. Nothing on the agenda. So we'll move to minutes approval. Before we vote on the minutes approval, I noted two action items in the minutes. One was an update on book sales strategy during the remodel by Jill Johnson. And I say this just to remind you to touch on this during your comments. Jessica, there was something on the website, redesign revised schedule. If you could touch on that in your comments. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move we approve the minutes as written.
Anyone second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Minutes are approved. There are two items on the consent agenda. They're bundled together. We're not planning on reviewing them unless someone requests. Otherwise, we'll approve them as a package. Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move to approve all matters on the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Okay, great. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, motion carried. And now we're moving into the report section. And the first report is by Jill Johnson, President of Friends of Boise Public Library. Hello, Jill.
Hello, good morning. I'm sorry, Brian, did you have a question for me?
There's an action item in the minutes that said you were going to provide a update on book sales strategy during the remodel period.
Oh, okay, sure, I can do that. We are not planning on having any of our sales this year, both because we don't currently have the inventory to do that, and also because we are dependent on the library's facilities, specifically the auditorium, and given the play with construction and everything else, we don't anticipate having any of our large format sales this year. If we, and this is a big if, because I haven't told Emily or anybody else about this yet, so please, no heart attacks. When the weather is nice, if we have enough inventory, we may ask if we can do a porch sale, but that is completely dependent on whether or not we have inventory once again. So the big update that I have for you is that we have secured outside space across the street in the Wilcom building, which is in the former Foothills school space. We will not be doing any sales out of there. It will simply be for processing and storage. We anticipate starting to take donations in the next couple of weeks. And once we have a firm plan, I will certainly share that with everyone. And the idea is specifically to be able to get enough inventory to keep our bookstore running during the remodeling process. So that is our game plan. And the other thing that we are very excited about being able to continue this year is also offering scholarships to library staff. So that is a program that we run every year in March and in September, accepting applications from library employees pursuing higher education. And so we look forward, hopefully, to having some of those applications to review next month.
And Jill, is the bookstore, is that inclusive of the Amazon sales efforts?
The Amazon sales will not be going forward once we're out of the fourth floor. The sheer volume of materials that we have is too large to relocate to the new space, if you can believe it. And so once we have moved the majority of our items off of the fourth floor, we are keeping Amazon running as long as we have fourth floor access. And then once the library tells us, which the last I heard was around the beginning of March, once everybody is off of the 4th floor, we will close down Amazon until we are able to reoccupy that space. So really during this year, our main fundraising avenue will be through the bookstore at Main.
Okay, so your activities are diminished somewhat, and probably that's going to affect the amount of revenue you take in.
Oh, very much so, yes. And the library has very graciously recognized that, and I believe that they have modified to the point of requesting nothing, I think, funding from us for this year so that we are able to, as I said, keep our volunteer corps engaged, keep our bookstore running, and continue to offer those scholarships.
Okay. Any other questions for Jill? Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
The next report is from Brian Manship, the chair of the Boise Public Library Foundation. Brian, welcome.
I don't see him on right now.
Okay, well, Brian's report is going to have to wait. And we'll move on to the director's report. Jessica, I forgot to ask, by the way, are there any introductions we should make?
I would like to take the opportunity to introduce, I think you know most people in the room from staff, but sitting just in the gray sweatshirt, that is Jason Richards, who is with our DFA team, so finance. So he's here with him to observe, so welcome. And then Eliza Ruby, have you met people before? I think you've met some of our trustees. She is the person, one of the dynamic duo behind the Ultimate Book Nerd, which I just want to take another moment to proudly display my 2022 finisher t-shirts. Eliza and Maggie got in all the gear, the swag. They spent last week putting it all together, spent Thursday delivering it to all locations. So if you are also an Ultimate Book Nerd 2022 finisher, you can go to your local location and pick them up, and you can register for 2023 and start reading. We had a great discussion with staff about it, and we've got some staff members who are in the double digits in terms of number of books they've read this year. But if you're like me and are still in the low single digits, you can do it. We can have a little support group. I want to take this moment to recognize Jill was pretty modest about saying that they moved out of the 4th floor. They had a huge group on Friday that was doing an incredible amount of lifting, and maybe like there was a direct sort of ant trail going back and forth between our location and next door, and just can't thank you and your volunteers enough, Jill. I know how disruptive this is. And we really do appreciate that you've continued to make scholarship funding available. I can promise you there is at least one that has been submitted already. So you'll get the opportunity to, as you know, it's one of our favorite things to do is to read those staff stories of why they're applying for the scholarship and what it means both to them professionally, but then what they bring back to the community. So really want to thank all of you for that. We recognize just how challenging this has been and will continue to. So really appreciate your support. Brian, as you asked me to update on the library website redesign, I don't have a schedule that I can share at this point, but we've definitely, since we last met, we've had some really good productive discussions with community engagement and IT on rescoping that, and we'll be able to really move that in a positive direction shortly. So stay tuned for that. There was also a question about the timing of the phase 1 renovations, and that came in my director's report. We'll do some work to get you some more clarity when we know. Right now, we've got some pretty generic sort of placeholders of how long we think things will take in those phases. But when we have more of those construction dates, when we have the sorter that'll be installed, when we know some of the different pieces will happen, we'll actually fill that in. So you get, we put some big placeholders, but we will then start to be able to narrow it down when we actually have those. And I also wanted to thank Councilmember Halliburton, who had actually suggested how we could particularly look at Learning Lab and are there other places downtown. They've been doing a lot of classes in our full and use stick, but I know Emily has followed up with Monique to look at other locations, so that was a great connection for us. And then with the last thing I want to talk about in my director's update before I answer any questions you may have, we did put the budget overview again. This may be a new document for some of you, it may be a refresher for others, but we're starting that process. We'll have a much more in-depth discussion about that in March. But just wanted to have that sort of overview and the rough timeline so that you can familiarize yourself with that. And then we'll, like I said, we'll talk more in March. We'll actually have Eric Villamoria, who works in the budget office, come and present. We'll have a discussion. And so with that, if there's any questions about my shirt or anything else, let me know.
You mentioned the phase one renovations, and there was a updated report in the materials about the status of things. I noted that the current estimates for the project are coming in higher than the budget. And I'm wondering if that is setting off any sort of alarm bells.
That's a great question. I think it's first off, we're seeing that across all construction projects in the city, that costs are coming in higher, just a function of the market. And so one of the things that we are doing is working with finance on how we're adjusting for that. So I don't see any, I don't think of it as an alarm, since it is a known issue that we'll put that towards.
Okay. And I noted 15 months duration. I don't know if I've seen that before, I just missed it, or if this is the first time it was highlighted, 15 months.
I think that, yeah, and that's sort of where I was saying that we're just putting in some, like, we think this large piece of work will take this long, but it gets sort of broken into different activities in that, and we're gonna try to get more clarity when we have specific dates that are a little more close. And obviously, when we know what we know, we're communicating with, you know, the friends, we're communicating with actually the staff that's currently up on the fourth floor, we're communicating with them.
Okay. Any other questions for Jessica? Thank you for your report. Now that takes us to, by the way, welcome Jason and Eliza. And Eliza is our next speaker. Eliza is Information Services Librarian. She's going to introduce us to a business value calculator.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Okay, yeah, so my name is Eliza Ruby. I am an information services librarian, also currently an interim information supervisor. So working on that transition right now, but today I'll be in my librarian position. I have that hat on today. And I want to talk to you today about our business value calculator that we just did. This one. So the business value calculator is from the Urban Libraries Council. They launched this calculator last year in 2022. It was created by their Economic Opportunity Action Team, and it's designed to help libraries estimate the value they provide to their local business community. So it takes a bunch of statistics, a bunch of numbers, all of the services that we provide, people who are entrepreneurs, businesses, startups, whatever they might be in the community, crunches all those numbers for us, breaks into 4 categories, and gives us the value that we're providing our community. So it breaks into training and education, research services, physical space, and technology and equipment. So once we ran this calculator, we found out that we are providing roughly $1.3 million in value to our business community. And the breakdowns are on the screen right there. If you are here, you also have it in front of you, a nice little handout in color, mine is black and white. So that gives you a breakdown. And then I just want to run through the numbers a little bit with you. So if you have questions on any of these numbers or how we got them or anything like that, please feel free to chime in. So first we look at training and education. So this is one-on-one consultation. So that's if anybody, I do a lot of the business reference questions, the market research questions here. A lot of those get deferred to me, but if anybody took a question that was over 15, 16 minutes or more, and they recorded it in our statistic gathering source, then I counted that in here. If it was an employment related question, so that was 16 or more minutes that got recorded, we put it in here. And then technology consultations, so that was anybody who was looking for job help and it took us less than 15 minutes to answer that question with them. So that's how we broke down those numbers right there. We also looked at classes and programming. So we have a monthly DIY business market research workshop. That's a virtual workshop that people can just drop in and ask questions. We also have one of our librarians teaches classes. She works with a teacher over at BSU, and she brings classes over who are working on learning nonprofits and grants and all that kind of stuff. So we have between those two, we have a value of $75 a person for those classes of what information they're learning from us. So that's how we got that number right there. And then for research services, this is where most of our value comes in. We have a ton of amazing databases. I love this number. I love seeing it as far as what our databases provide for people. It's such a powerful tool that we have. So you have your industry reports and your market research reports. So those two, we just broke down our primary database, Merchant Intellect. We broke that one in half for what we can see. For how many reports were pulled from there, files downloaded is what they called it in their system. But the industry reports are, what's happening within your industry, within your field. And then the market research reports are, the reports on who your competitors are or who you might want to be working with and any information that they have publicly available for those companies. So that is a very, very powerful tool to have at your fingertips of the library. We also counted LinkedIn Learning, Foundation Directory Online, so all of our nonprofit grant seekers, and then all of our print books and our ebooks that are tagged for business. So depending on what part of the collection it's in, for our physical books and for our electronic books, anything in Overdrive that has the tag of business. I do have a note, we didn't include anything from O'Reilly in here, which is another ebook database that we have, in part because they just had no easy way of breaking it down. And also because the books that you find in O'Reilly are vastly more expensive than the books that people would be purchasing from Overdrive if they were to purchase it themselves. So that number just didn't work out in the calculations we made. So that one there, so our numbers could be different if we were able to break that one down a little more too. As far as physical space, what I did for this one is I looked at all of our meeting room spaces. I looked at the full log of every single meeting room that was used and just looked at the titles that people used for them and if it was very clearly for business purposes. So if it said job interview, I counted it for business, or if it had the business name, or I've interacted with them so I know it's their business, anything like that I added in here. If it was unclear or if it was very clearly not business, it obviously did not get added in here. And then the co-working space, I used 5% of our total study room usage because there's no way for us to know how much of our study rooms are being used for business. We know that, we have a number of people coming in to use them for meetings, for virtual meetings, all of that. And so the 5% is actually the suggestion of the business value calculator folks. They said, if you don't have that exact number, shoot for 5% of what you do. So that's what we did there. And then we said it was $75 per study room. And that is the monthly. So theirs is for people who are regularly coming in. And that is the price of Trailhead for a monthly membership for their base monthly membership. So that's why we set that at $75 for that. And then we have technology and equipment. So these numbers include the public internet usage. And so we do not have an internet cafe here, so I could not base this on any numbers locally, but their suggestion was $12 on average for a public PC login. If you were to look at something here, the only place that we can really look is FedEx across the street. It is much more expensive than that per hour, but that's kind of our only comparison that we could look at. So I decided to go with the Urban Library Council number. And then again, we just pulled 5% of that because we don't track what people are doing on the computer. So I cannot determine, how many people specifically are doing business things. And then same with the office equipment, the photocopier and scanner and the fax machine. I used numbers as close as I could to what FedEx charges, since they are the closest people who also offer these services. And then, 5% of all of that usage across our branches in here. Very fast breakdown of a lot of numbers. How y'all doing?
Pretty good. So
Good, okay. So this was our first year doing this. We are using this as a baseline, so we can see how we do in future years. So we want to do this again, using the same data, where we pulled the data from, all of that, so we can keep up a consistent number and just keep tracking this. And this means that we can see where our strengths are, where we could improve, and just keep getting better, hopefully. Yeah. Any questions?
I had a couple. I think you said it and I missed it. Gimlet statistic tag, is that an important name I should know?
That is our tracking system we use. So when we're at the service desk, we have a website. Gimlet is the name of it, so that's just what we call it. I wasn't sure how else to refer to it in here, but that's where we can track our statistics. So we can track what service desk we were at, how long the question was. We can put tags in there, so if it was business related or resume help or any variety of topics. So
That
that's
answers
just how
my
we
next
track it.
question. Actually.
Oh, good.
Because I was, your consultations requires almost data collection like you were an accountant or a lawyer.
Mhm.
Time spent on task, and you have the tool, getting the statistic tag to do that.
Mhm.
I was surprised how much substance there was to your justification. When I was reading it without being exposed to it, it seemed like it was going to be soft justification. I consider this relatively firm justification. And the assumptions about values of them seem realistic to me. So I guess I'm offering a comment. I'm surprised by the quality of this business value calculator.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And we left out anything if there was not a justification for it, then we didn't include it in here. So there are things that we don't offer or we can't track, like our Adobe Creative Cloud suite package bundle thing, words. So we can't track how many people are using that or logging on to that subscription. So we didn't include that in here because there's just no way for us to track that. So there are a number of things that we did leave out because there were no justifications for it. So this, I would say even this is probably a modest summary of what we're actually saving our business to be.
And this number, approximately $1.3 million, was for calendar year 2022.
Yes.
Very good. Any other questions?
Right, if I could, it might be worth if there's a way to just, because I'm just thinking I'm familiar with Creative Cloud and that's a huge benefit for people to be able to use that. So it might be if there's a way to just note that somewhere that there are additional services that are also of the benefit that we just aren't able to value in here. I'm just thinking, and I think this kind of thing is so useful to be able to demonstrate the, people love to have like black and white demonstration of the value that you're providing back as a public community service. So I think this is really wonderful. Good job.
Thank you so much.
I have a question about comparison. So this is pretty interesting. And what I'm curious about is, are we able through the Urban Libraries Council to see what other communities of similar size or similar demographics are in comparison to our value calculation, and what might that look like?
Yeah, if they've done this and they have, so I know Urban Libraries Council did a push a while back to have as many libraries as they could do this. And I think they'll probably do that again at some point, I would imagine. But they, once they had all those numbers, they shared out a bunch of the different libraries who did that. And so if anybody who is, you know, comparative to us has done it, then we could probably see those numbers or reach out to other libraries and see if they've done it, if we know they're members of Urban Library Council, and get there and get that information.
Yeah, I would just be curious to see how we compare to others, or even what the kind of national average of the participants was, to get a feel for what's a good number, what's low, what's high, and what are others experiencing, and how are others, you know, calculating their measures as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
So,
Any other questions?
yeah, I've got a couple of questions. In the Gimlet data, you had a threshold of 15 minutes. I'm curious what the rationale is for that.
For Gimlet, we currently have, we've tried a number of things over the years, but we found that most interactions that happen at the service desks are under 15 minutes or over 15 minutes. And so we do also track which is a directional question and which is a reference question. And so those can be two key things. But I think in Eliza, there are two types of questions. And she went with the longer ones helped answer some type of business questions, and the shorter ones helped answer another type of business question, both being tagged with business help.
Something I think would be very interesting would be to look at how much did the library spend on providing this value, and sort of what's our ROI on this. And, you know, having a goal of increasing that ROI year over year. So is there any information about what the library invested in these?
I don't have that information, but that is a really good point to see how much, like what we spend versus what the community saves.
Mm-hmm. The other question I have is on your last slide here, if there's any sense within the library yet of what these opportunities to better promote the services might be.
That's a great question. I mean, I think looking at all of this, I know we could always expand different pieces of it. So our training and education piece could always be expanded with different programs. And just, I mean, this as our first year, knowing, you know, the information that we're looking at, just knowing that we need to gather more statistics and more data throughout the year to really get a clear image of what we're actually helping our community save.
Yeah, I would encourage, you know, rather than launching into new training programs, I would encourage you to look first at just raising the awareness among our community of what the library already has in this area. And like you said, there's a tremendous resource in the online databases that's available for free for people. And I think our first step should be for raising the awareness that that's available.
I agree. And to piggyback off what Phil just said, I even think with this data, the way the statistics are calculated is interesting, but an additional piece would be a little bit of qualitative data. If when you're speaking to different groups or sending out educational materials about the offerings, to also ask local folks, what else would you want? What else would you need? You know, we've talked about that in terms of 3D printers, or are people utilizing the services, or when you do to talk to somebody, do you speak to them for more than 15 minutes? Just a brief bit of listening among the small business or the business community in general would be interesting, specifically around this area. I know we've just done a lot with strategic planning, but I'm always a big fan of capturing that community voice because sometimes they tell us something different from what numbers will tell us.
Yeah, I'd like to add that it's actually very encouraging to me that you've been doing this work. I think this is an important area for the library that's sort of a undiscovered gem. And it's really good that we're taking a look at where we stand on this. So thank you.
Yeah.
And one other thought, stimulated by those questions, is there any satisfaction survey, something of that nature that's administered on a sample basis or a per visit basis, anything where you capture feedback on how the user valued your services qualitatively?
Nothing formal. Yeah. And I know like in the business market research workshop that I lead, you know, people just at the end of it will just be like, I had no idea this was here. This is amazing. You know, they're so excited to just dive into that Pandora's box of information.
Mr. Chair, I've got a question on it. First of all, I think this is phenomenal, especially it being the first year, the first time that you've done this, to be able to pull this data. From a nonprofit perspective, it's like really impressive, and I'm glad that my board's not here so they can see what you're doing and what might be expected of me. But from the city council perspective, this is really cool. And one of the things I think that's brought up that would be effective, again, from the city council perspective, is the summary of the things that aren't included in here, because this is such a conservative estimate when you start thinking about the creative suite, when you start thinking about even like the wellness benefit of when I read something that helps me with my work that actually isn't related to my work whatsoever. So there's so many unknowns that like can't possibly be calculated, that there might be an opportunity in a paragraph or a summary to explain some of those things that actually probably add even more value. My question though, is are there ways of telling what sort of like the max capacity of some of these things are? So like the meeting space, do we know like the percentage of times that our meeting spaces are used, so we can tell that we're generating this funds from it, but this is actually the max we would ever be able to based off the amount of times that those are available? Is there any data that would show us like how close we are to like hitting our peak or topping out, you know, in any of these areas?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm sure there'd be a way to see.
So, you know, it's interesting too, because of those are, you know, we could look at, okay, of all the hours that were open and have these rooms available, what percentage of them are booked? Then Eliza did the next round of like, okay, you know, we talked about this. She said, well, if it was the Girl Scout troop that meets every Thursday,
Sure.
that did not make it into the business. So there is a bit of, you know, I like that idea of pulling it up and saying like, hey, we know these meeting rooms, like when they're open, how much are they booked? And then look at that first, and then look at, okay, what percentage of it is maybe, you know, maybe it's health related, maybe it's education related, maybe it's business related, just because they are rooms that do have multiple uses.
Yeah, it's such a nuanced thing. It would be really hard to record, but it does kind of speak to like
Or
the
capacity
value,
overall, right?
Yeah, or the value capacity that the library has for its community. And if we knew that our meeting rooms were only booked a third of the time, we would say this is how much money we generated or how much value we created through these only being booked a third of the time. So to, you know, Phil's point earlier, if we did additional outreach, if people knew more, we actually have this is our potential value that we could be adding to. I just think it's such a phenomenal report, and I imagine it took a ton of work. So I hope that you're thinking feedback. keep that in mind as well, that like you've done a really great job. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Eliza.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to some old business, and the first topic is policy review, one of my personal favorite topics. And Huda Shaltru, the manager of the Hillcrest branch, is here to take us through one of the items.
Thank you. Thanks for introducing me too. I always get nervous introducing my own self for some reason. But yes, so policy review, it's not, well, I've been told it's not scary for me to do this. Is what I've been. There isn't any changes that we're making. It's just that we have added clarity to a service that we provide of interlibrary loan. So you'll see we have the interlibrary loan here, and it was revised in 2019. And then the next page in your packets are the scope of the interlibrary loan service, and just clarity and consistency with the language throughout. Yeah. You guys have any questions about it?
I did have a question which was answered for me.
Yeah.
I never noted the term borrower's card before. And I asked Carrie and she filled me in on it.
Yeah, city policy
I
versus
I kind of view it, there's three types. There's resident and non-resident and the corporate card, right?
Mhm.
And they're all borrowers,
Right,
but we tend to call the resident one a borrower's card also.
right.
So if anybody else was confused by that, or just me.
I was confused, but I'm glad that you asked the question because it was clarified to me as well. So yes,
All right. So the policy uses the term borrower's card, and I think that's the correct term referenced in the city code and some other places. And I didn't know any need for any changes either. So it's straightforward policy.
great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, that takes us on to a big item on the agenda, the strategic planning discussion. Now that we've all had the benefit of being able to read the strategic planning phase 1 summary report, and we looked at slides together last week and had a little time to think about them. Heidi Lewis, the manager of the main library, is going to take us through a discussion on it.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you as always for letting me join you today to talk about the strategic plan. Okay, so for our agenda today, we're going to have the key insights discussion and then just a quick overview of next steps. So the goal for today's key insights discussion, as you mentioned, Brian, at January's board meeting, we introduced the key insights and followed up with a 165-page summary. So since you have hopefully had a chance to review those, process that information from last time, it was requested that we revisit the key insights in this meeting today with these goals in mind. So to ensure you all have a common understanding of the key insights from phase 1, to identify any questions that you may have about the insights, and to discuss how you imagine we can use these key insights to advocate for the library in phase 2 of the strategic plan. So because not everyone has a copy of the key insights, we also have those in your packets as well, but everyone joining in the room and online may not. I'll go through the key insights really quickly, just the ones on the left. We do have 12 key insights across 4 areas of focus. So the first area of focus is library community connection insights. We have 2 key insights under there. 1, the library and the city of Boise are at a pivotal moment of change and adaptation. Number 2, as the library adjusts for growth and change, the community wants the library to continually assess how to maximize the use of its resources and expertise. Our next, sorry.
Stop for these.
Yes. Oh, I was going to read through all of them, and then we've got 4 questions to go through, but it's up to you if you'd like to discuss each slide at a time.
Will I disrupt you if we discuss each one at a time?
It's up to the group. If we have the 4 questions separately in a later slide, but we can share those earlier and then go back through the key insights.
I particularly note the item mentioned in number 2, the library runs the risk of doing too much. And that seems like a really important point. both for our annual budget exercises and as we take off on the strategic plan implementation phase. And it seems to me that there needs to be some element of organizing the initiatives that we're currently doing and thinking about doing. And some effort put into things we're going to do more of, things we're going to start doing, things we're going to do less of, and things we're going to kill, terminate. Now, I think having that as a reference point, an inventory of things that fall into those categories is going to be very useful for the annual budget exercise and the strategic plan, as I said. That's the primary point I wanted to make on that. I get some other ones as they come up.
Brian, can I ask just a quick question? So I think because this I think will help inform all my other questions, but is that what phase 2 will do? Really sort of lay out, you know, kind of like this is what we want to focus on, this we're going to let go. Is that part of just the role of phase 2?
I think that's a great question. I know we'll definitely need, but with the strategic plan that we are prioritizing what we're focusing on. So I think that's a really good point, that in order to get to that prioritization and to get to that focus, we also need to be talking about what we're doing less of. I don't know that that will actually show up in the final written report. Since we'll be concentrating on here's what we're focusing on, which is really, really important for the community to know, to hold us accountable, and then also for staff to be able to implement those. But that's a great question of, I think from the other strategic plans I've looked at, a couple of dozen that we're kind of comparing ourselves to the peer libraries that we've benchmarked with, and then other ones as well, that just have really great strategic plan frameworks. I haven't seen that sort of thing of here's what we've stopped doing, here's what we're doing less of, but really just focusing on here's what we're going to do more of or do that's new.
But in deciding what's in the plan and what is our focus, part of that would be this isn't in the plan because we've looked at it as part of this phase 2, and 10 other people in the community are doing it, so we're duplicating. So
Yes.
maybe that's something we let go. So is that part of? Maybe I didn't mean part of the final plan, but part of that process of
Yes.
creating the plan.
Yep, I think that's a
Okay.
great point. Yeah, for each of these, as we're going through them, I imagine that we'll be doing a deeper dive, both going back to the 165-page report, possibly even going back to the raw data if we want to know more specifically about if we had one for programs, for example, that we would go back and relook at the data about programs, and then also compare it to our current data about programs, possibly even look at 2019 pre-pandemic. And I think that's a great point. And then do some more of that environmental scan specifically about programs if we're going to really move forward with a focus on that. So that's a great point. Thank you.
All right, continue.
Okay. And would it be helpful if I jumped quickly to the slides where we have some questions for discussion, and we can go back to the key insights?
Whichever you think is best.
Okay. Nikki, do you have a preference?
No,
Or
my
other
problem,
board members here? Okay.
my preference is to withhold comments until you're through this. Talk to the questions.
Okay.
I will do that.
Okay, sounds good. So our next area of focus is library role and scope insights. So we had 4 insights under this one. Number 3 out of the 12 is Boise residents and library stakeholders are strongly aligned in expecting the library to be inclusive and serve all Boise residents. Number 4, Boise residents believe the library should play a lead role in education, including early childhood education, literacy, and lifelong learning. And then number 5 is the community wants the library to serve a supporting role as a central access point for community resources and organizations. And the community wants the library to strengthen the programs it provides for children ages 6 to 11, teens, and adults. So these 4 are under the library role and scope insights.
Could I ask a quick question here? What's the difference between number 4 and number 6?
I think number 4, there are so many ways that we provide education, whether that's through our collection, it's certainly through our programs as part of it. It's through what we do at the service desk. It's through the flyers that we have. So I think we can provide education through every program we do and every service where we provide, where in my mind, number 6 is specifically about programs. and that the programs we have, while all educational, have a different focus. That it may be that the education isn't the, many of our programs are for entertainment, for bringing the community together. Again, they all have educational components, but that currently may not be the very number one thing we're looking at. Where with number 4, we're really looking at where can we lead in education across all the things that the library currently is providing and what else it could add to provide even more.
Thank you.
Okay, keep rolling. So our third area of focus is library resources and facilities. And we have 4 key insights under that topic. Number 7 out of the 12 is community members highly value the library's print and digital collections. The community is, and number 8 is the community is not fully aware of all the library has to offer. Number 9, continued under library resources and facilities insights. The community wants the library to enhance its physical spaces and provide a welcoming, friendly atmosphere. And number 10, the community wants the library to have the appropriate resources needed to achieve the community's vision for the library. All right, I'll move on to the final area. Area 4 is library staff, culture, and systems. And we have 2 insights, the final 11 and 12. So number 11 is while staff have a positive outlook on the library's workplace culture, there are opportunities to improve some of the library's systems and structure. And number 12, the library should better utilize data to continually reassess its programs and services and inform decision-making. And I think we had a great example of that in our previous discussion with the business calculator. All right, so for the key insights discussion, then we have these 4 questions that we worked on, which is, are there any key insights that are not clear or that you have questions about? Are there any key insights that surprised you? What key insights did not surprise you? And when considering these key insights, what should be considered for the current phase and crafting the strategic plan? So these were just suggestions. You're also, of course, welcome to talk about anything else.
Natasha, I know you need to
Yes.
slide off. Can we give the floor to you before you go?
Honestly, I have to sit on it a little bit more. I'm one of these people that has to process, like I've looked at the giant document you guys printed out for us. I've got I think it's very clear, in all honesty. When I look through those insights, I think you guys did a really amazing job summarizing. For me, there's the one that I'm probably the most concerned, I don't know if that's the right word. I don't think the community does know the amazing things that we have with our Boise Public Library services. That for me is hugely important. And I wish I had more ideas on how to do that, but just in my own job and what I do working with refugee students and kids who are living at the homeless shelter and all of those sorts of things, they often are surprised. Go around the corner to the library, there is internet. Go around they don't know. And I would love to be a part of that piece and that underserved population, because those are the folks that really need it the most. And those are the ones we really need to reach. So for me, that is the key insight that, I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. Unfortunately, libraries are just undervalued, I think. I don't know. But there's such a plethora of things here, more than just books. I push that all the time. People, since I'm doing the same thing at the school library, more than books over here. Same thing. So that's the insight for me that I'm really interested in working with and helping out with. And speaking of, I'm going to go slide out and present at a conference right down the street. So incredible resources. I'll plug the library.
Thanks, you guys.
So I've got a question about this.
Take it away, Phil.
So when I went through and looked at the peer review results, I didn't draw any really strong conclusions from that. And I'm wondering how the peer comparisons might have filtered into these items, or how that influenced the selection of these.
That's a great point. I'll start and then see if Jessica has any additional. I think the peer benchmarking really helps with, kind of to your point, Nikki, of how are we going to move forward in helping us decide, and Brian's point as well, what we should be doing more of, less of, stopping and starting. And I think as we look at, I'll use the program example, that would be another place where we would go back to that report and even see if we want to do deeper dives going back to those libraries. If we found that one of the libraries had a particular approach to programming that was so different than what we do, that we could really learn from them. And then also the statistics of where we line up, kind of to Rebecca's point with the business calculator before, of if we're really low on programs, which we weren't, but if we were really low on programs compared to the other 14 libraries that we were looking at, then that would give us another indication of we're not meeting community needs, or we're not filling the capacity that some of these other public libraries that we're peers with could. So I think all of that really helps give us an idea of where we're already excelling at and where we have a lot of potential, and then helping us make those decisions of what we prioritize.
Okay. Another question I had was that I can't put my finger on exactly where it is, but I think somewhere in this report, there's a comment about essentially rebranding the library, and that could be just a more clear articulation of what the library is. But do you see that reflected in the key insights as, you know, an important element, or today would you make that more of a second tier item?
That's a great question. I'll start again, and then Jessica, if you want to jump in at any point. I believe that was a comment that one of the community partner interviewees made. So I do remember that specifically. So I think it was one of the community partner interviewees made that comment of that potentially the library doesn't say enough. So is there another word that we could use so that people could better understand what the library can do? We'll have a new communications manager soon for the library, and we'll continue in phase 2 working closely with the Office of Community Engagement. And I think it's tied very much to the key insight that Natasha brought up, that the community doesn't know what we do. And so there's potential to do some rebranding through that. So in my mind, that's where the rebranding shows up, is in that key insight that the community does not know enough of what we do and what we can do.
Yeah, and I'll just add that it is an interesting, when you think of sort of how other communities have approached that idea of rebranding. In some cases, it's like we'll have a new logo and then we'll do a big launch. And in some cases, like we're going to change the name of this institution. So there's really a lot in that idea of rebranding. I lean more into the like, a library is a well-known term, and let's help people understand what a modern library is. Because I think in some cases it's easier first to take a term that people are familiar with and update your image of that, as opposed to like, let's try to create a new word. But there are definitely different ways different communities have looked at that exact question of how do we have an institution that people have an idea and it may not be what that reality is. So I think that's interesting to explore. And then Phil, I'll go back to your point about the peer benchmarks, because one of the things that we are already finding benefit from, we were on Heidi and I had a chance to talk to the director and deputy of the Arkansas library system yesterday. We've got a call scheduled with the group in Arizona. So we've been able to pull some of the pieces that they were identified as being really strong in, particularly in Arizona data collection and their dashboard that they have, and it's like, oh, okay, let's find out about that, and we're trading back and forth, you know. Part of the discussion we had with Arkansas was about some of the work they're doing, but how they handle strategic planning and staffing. So there's also just a huge benefit for us finding those libraries that are similar to us in size and sort of community challenges, because now we've got a stronger network.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with you on your comments about the branding. I think I would echo Natasha's previous comments that it seems like there's a bit of a gap in awareness of what the library could be for the community.
Heidi, on number 3, inside number 3, I noted 2 things that were reinforced in some of the staff interviews and some of the peer benchmarking analysis. That inclusiveness has to be balanced with safety. In particular, all the qualitative reports on the peer benchmarking libraries said they're wrestling with the same sort of homeless issues that we are, varying degrees, some greater, some less, but they all are wrestling with it, worried about. Both providing services as well as not scaring away existing service users. And I don't know, the one other thing in number 3 was a message that came through loud and clear from both those sources was remaining politically neutral. And it might be worth mentioning those 2 items. Just throw that out for that purpose for you to consider. I don't know if I understand all the data, and I had Carrie helping me understand exactly the definition of collection and circulation yesterday. But the Boise Public Library is fairly high, 4th of 15 in collection expenditures per capita. So we spend a fair amount of money on our collection, and I think that's good. Boise Public Library is fairly low, 12 of 15 in collection items per capita. So we spend a lot of money, we spend it on the fewest things per capita. And it got me wondering, does that mean we're paying too much for the things that we're buying? It's worth just digging in, not giving off the wrong impression by the contrasting feel of those 2 points.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I would be happy to speak to that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we struggle with is, yes, we purchase a lot of materials and we are out of space to put materials. So to make room for the new materials, we have to remove materials from the collection. So when you're talking about physical materials, which is what we're seeing the highest trend in, especially in youth and teen, print is where they want to be. So we are seeing a trend there that we need to continue to buy print in order to buy replacements and buy new materials. We have to make room for them. So specifically right now, we're struggling with the fact that when we just weeded our collection and pulled out materials in order to make room for the new items coming in, we're having to remove things that are still circulating. So we're pulling things off the shelf that people still are showing us they want, but we have to be able to make room for newer materials. That impacts our collections from the point of view that we don't have the right depth. So we don't have as much content in a variety of areas. And it's a struggle to offer as much diversity and inclusivity from the point of view of some of those titles might not circulate quite as much as some of the more popular ones. So we're struggling to make sure that we can balance the collection in a way that we're meeting the need of most of the community and still making sure that we have materials for all. So it's a tough space to be in to try to figure out how to continue to offer that in the room that we're in. So we've been trying to come up with some creative ideas that we might be able to expand our collection size without expanding our footprint and not losing space for the public to be in the buildings.
Okay, makes sense. I understand. It's a dilemma, quite a dilemma.
Yes.
Another topic, just a general topic that came through loud and clear, is we have staff pay problem. This came in the peer benchmarking, exhibits 87, 90, 94. And it also came across in the staff interviews. There was a lot of comments about we need a living wage and subsistence wage. You could tell that there was some strong feelings about it that were coming up in the conversations. And I'll tie this back to the key points. Number 11. The main point, while staff have a positive outlook on the library workplace culture, there are opportunities to improve some of the library's systems and structure. I think the sub bullets, maybe even the top bullet, could be improved a little bit to point out some of the issues that the library has wrestled with. The staff in interviews mentioned challenged as one of the definitions or one of the key words for the library. And they put in that staffing, retention, staffing, recruiting. They put in it facility, space available. They put in it safety, the environment. So I think that this could work a little harder for you, number 11, to send the message to the people that we're trying to reach about why we want to make the changes that we're going to seek in the strategic plan. That's part of your pressing need to be addressed. Let's see. One more. Number 8. I saw in the peer benchmarking review a number that really surprised me. I expected Boise to be relatively high on the percentage of registered users in the community. And the high players were up in the 70s, even I think there was one even in the low 80s. We were 54, which put us relatively low. So not only do we have an awareness problem, all the good things the library offers, but we have a participation problem that it seems needs some focus in the strategic plan in our implementation phase. I think that's it. I know I'm taking a lot of time, but I have a lot of questions. Anybody else want to jump in?
I'll just give, I mean, most of my takeaways echo what everybody else has said. What I don't want to get lost is that what it showed to me is that the library is on the right track. And it was, you know, for all the information you gathered, I think it was so positive. A lot of the time you put something out there and you get a lot of negative. So I think that's important to remember that, and is a good indication that you're doing great things. And I would echo that. To me, the focus should be on making people more aware of all those things, maybe enhancing the things that are going well. And I do think I always I struggle with this because I think it can be hard to do and often misused, but I do think this data piece of being able to really, in some quantitative way, regularly show the impact you have on the community will be helpful in doing all of that. And in asking for more resources when you need them and those things. So those are my takeaways. I think they're really in line with what everybody else is saying.
Yeah, your last point falls in line with item number 12, better utilize data. And I think you've heard from all the trustees in questions today that number 8 is probably the most important one of all. And probably ought to get that sort of focus in the strategic plan work going forward. Okay, are we exhausted yet?
Mr. Chair, I do have just one quick comment. To your point about number 11, I don't think it's out of line with what was mentioned. talk about how the cost of living in Boise has effect on the library, staffing and the long-term success of the library. And that certainly is a concern across all departments, but I would say that that's a big conversation that needs to be had, is the rising cost of living and the ability for the library staff to keep up with that cost of living in a very pointed way. And then the other thing that I would say, as far as when considering the insights, there's 2 insights that are right next to each other, 2 and 3. One saying that the risk of the library runs the risk of the library trying to do too much, and then in number 3, the importance of inclusivity. And I don't think that those 2 things have to be in conflict with each other. And so I think that there's a chance that when some people may read those 2 things, they may think that they are competing and that there's tension. And I don't think that that actually has to be the case. And that those things actually can complement each other quite a bit.
I think for me, I'm quite interested in the implementation of this. I love a good data collection and some time to do some introspection. But I'm really interested in the next steps and which of these points we really want to hone in on and do some deep diving. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, 12 is a lot to tackle at once. So I'm curious what a prioritization process will look like to determine, which of these are shorter term action items that can be addressed, which are longer term, things to think on. But how are we going to prioritize what's going to be worked on? What is the ability for staff to have input on those priorities, as well as us as the board to have some discussion around which of these is going to be the easiest to tackle and the most impactful. Clearly we're kind of leaning in around some of these issues around communications. I do think there's a lot of opportunity with potentially a new website design and some other things to talk about innovative new ways to do marketing and communications, to discuss what the role is, but then also these internal conversations about, the adding and the taking away, and then also how to lean into some of these unique spaces as a community connector, which is what I'm reading out of this, is this desire for, you don't need to provide the specific services, but be a connector to those services, especially for a lot of the folks that view the library as a trusted and safe space. So I'm just interested in kind of carrying forward the discussion into great information, so much here. How do we distill it into action items that we intend to take over the next couple of years?
I think we'll bring discussion to a close for now. I won't be surprised if we have this topic again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to go to the,
Yeah,
because I
I've
think
got one
Rebecca
slide.
just talked about
Yes.
March.
Exactly. So absolutely, this is incredible feedback.
Yeah,
We will take all of this and try to reflect it back to you when we come back to do the strategic plan briefing in March. So just very, very briefly, we are in phase 2 drafting plan, and we will be back in March to talk about it more with you. Our first step in phase 2 was revising our mission and values and creating a new vision. The library management team has taken that to staff. So we're following the same cadence that we did in phase 1, taking it to staff first, then bringing it to the board, then bringing it to the community. And also included that is City Council. So I also wanted to let you know that we'll be updating City Council on the strategic plan on February 28th. So again, thank you. This is incredibly helpful. We'll try to reflect this back the next time we see you. Thank you again.
All right. We're going to have a quick update on the library director performance review. Nikki's made a lot of progress since the last report. I just want to get a brief update for everybody.
Yes, it's in progress. The city actually has already provided some feedback, and then working with human resources to put a survey out to employees, and then I'll be sending you your self-evaluation form probably today to give you some time to work through that.
Do you have an updated list, or maybe we'll get this from HR for the people for the survey? There's been some changes.
Yeah, let me find out from
Okay.
the human resources
Yeah.
person.
Okay.
You're welcome. I'll follow up with you after.
Yeah,
and we
okay.
can
Because I want to
coordinate,
make sure
we've got
we,
the
last
right
year we
list.
had some people that weren't included in.
Okay.
We just want to make sure that everybody should be included in that survey.
I will ping her and see who she's got and run it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Nikki, for your efforts. I know you're very busy. Especially appreciate your progress on this. We have a new business item, Idaho Library Facility Grant. And Jessica's going to take us through that topic.
Yeah, so the last thing on the agenda, or the new business on the agenda, is that we are bringing forward for the board for their consideration and approval to allow the library to apply to a grant that is for library facilities through the Idaho Commission for Libraries. Two things to note about this. One, this funding is contingent on the Idaho State Legislature, which is right now in session, actually accepting this money and providing it to ICFL. So that has not yet happened, but that's in the budget that I think ICFL presented on Monday to JFAC. And then this is also a two-step process. So the first one is we need the process from ICFL is to have applying libraries qualify, and part of qualifying is that the board of trustees is supportive of that. So this is why it's just a high level letter saying that you're aware of this and that we would be working once we're qualified to apply, then we would actually work on the specifics of what that would look like. So the reason that there are no specifics is that at this stage, it really is just making sure that the board approves of us looking for this funding.
And to further that effort, letter has been prepared under my signature saying we really value this opportunity to gain this funding and hope it passes. Is that something you can put up on the screen, or it's in everyone's package?
It's in everyone's packet. It is on page 16.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to need to have a motion on this to approve the sending of this letter on the Board of Trustees' behalf.
I will move to approve Brian sending this letter on behalf of the board.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you for that. Motion carried. And the next item is the selection of the trustee to view payment vouchers for the next month, and that's going to be yours truly. And I'm prepared to do that. And the next meeting is scheduled on March 8th. I will not be here for that. And Rebecca has kindly volunteered to take my place. And I will participate in the March 1st meeting, Rebecca, with Jessica to talk about the agenda for the meeting.
My understanding is that does not work for Rebecca, so we.
Yeah, it has been rescheduled. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'll be traveling.
Yeah,
We'll send you the, do you know that?
I don't think I did see that, so.
We, Carrie and I will follow up with you
Okay, all right.
with the, I think it's the week before.
22nd.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
and is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carried. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation.